Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a massive, multi-generational mystery about human hubris and, honestly, how we build the literal world around us. We're going to unpack this incredible case study that asks a pretty profound question. What actually happens when we try to construct our physical reality entirely out of pure mathematical certainty? Spoiler alert, it doesn't go well. Okay, to really ground this, let's look at one specific number, 342. That is the exact number of people who lost their lives on a random Tuesday night when the Meridian Tower collapsed. Literally, in a matter of seconds, they went from building occupants to tragic statistics. And the crazy thing is, this wasn't just a regular building falling down. It was the complete, catastrophic failure of a supposedly flawless mathematical argument. 342 lives gone, all because we had absolute faith in perfect logic. Which brings us to Section 1, when a logic collapses. Let's unpack the fascinating but completely fatal premise that set this whole disaster in motion. So the whole thing started with this concept called logical architecture, or ABLS. The mastermind here was Dr. Keisha Volt. She was this brilliant architect who genuinely believed we could construct shelter out of pure reason. It sounds wild, right? But the theory was actually beautifully elegant. Volt argued that if you could just translate architectural decisions into formal logical premises and then verify them with an algorithm, your building wouldn't just probably stand up, it was mathematically guaranteed to stand. And you know what? For 7 entire years, the Meridian Tower actually operated flawlessly under this exact hubristic theory. It was quite literally a towering monument to load-bearing arguments, right up until the moment it wasn't. But long before the Meridian fell, there was one really loud dissenting voice. Enter Dr. Marcus Voigt, a philosopher who basically looked at ABLS and threw a massive wrench in it. He brought out Gödel's incompleteness theorems, which is heavy stuff, but basically, Voigt proved that every logical system, no matter how genius, has gaps. There are always true statements that just can't be proven from inside the system itself. So, by treating architecture as pure verifiable math, Voigt warned that we were literally building on flawed foundations. He was screaming from the rooftops that absolute certainty is a dangerous illusion. And tragically, he was dead right. All right, moving into Section 2, the sabotage and cover-up. Let's step into the rubble alongside Inspector Tam Okonkwo to find out how a mathematical glitch turned out to be a deeply human error. So, Inspector Tam starts putting together a timeline and she discovers something absolutely shocking. Dr. Eamon Carver, the actual logical consultant who helped design the building's math, was inside the tower during the collapse. Why? Because Carver had finally realized Marcus Voigt was right. He had literally found the fatal subtle flaw in the math that the algorithms totally missed. So at 11:47 p.m., Carver sneaks into the building's logical core. His plan? Force a controlled demonstration of the flaw to prove to everyone the system was fundamentally broken. But well, human behavior is messy. The building wasn't completely empty. His controlled failure spiraled totally out of his control, and at 3:14 a.m., the tower suffered a catastrophic collapse. And this sparks just a massive philosophical dilemma. On one hand, you have Carver's intent. He was desperate to expose the truth and force systemic reform without hurting a soul. But on the other hand, the legal system completely crushed him, convicting him of manslaughter and painting him as a rogue saboteur. It forces us to ask this brilliant Socratic question. If you demonstrate a fatal flaw in a system, and that demonstration accidentally kills people, are you a murderer or are you a critic? Is proving a flaw exists the exact same thing as causing it? Now, if you thought the story ended with Carver going to jail, hold on. Because years later, while digging through the archives, Inspector Tam uncovers something devastating. Another logical consultant on the project, Dr. Helena Cross, had secretly gone in and modified the logic files after the collapse. Why on earth would she do that? Well, she realized Carver's rogue test was going to completely destroy her entire field of architecture. So, to protect her life's work, she framed him. She tweaked the data so the collapse would look like the deliberate sabotage of one bad actor rather than a fundamental flaw in logical architecture itself. It is a chilling look at how institutions will literally manufacture certainty and sacrifice their own people just to hide the truth. That brings us to Section 3, the trap of transparency. Because 15 years later down in São Paulo, the architectural world tried to fix things and, well, they overcorrected hard. So, after the Meridian disaster, you have this new architect, Ana Rojas, and she designs the Ascension Tower. She takes one look at logical architecture and says, nope, no more perfect certainty. Instead, she pioneers this concept called transparent architecture. Her whole thing was acknowledging uncertainty. She meticulously documented every single assumption, mapped out every tiny gap in the math, and made every possible way the building could fail completely public. She didn't hide the flaws at all. She literally put them on display. But the kicker? Both eras ultimately ended in failure. Which brings us to another really grim number, 63. See, the Ascension Tower actually did fail in exactly 3 of the precise ways Rojas predicted it would. Now, because they knew how it would fail, it happened gradually, and they actually managed to order an evacuation. But the sheer chaos of getting everyone out, we're talking heart attacks in stairwells, stampedes, traffic accidents, it still claimed 63 lives. Having all that transparent documentation allowed them to sound the alarm, sure, but it absolutely did not prevent a tragedy. And this just perfectly illustrates what we call the trap of transparency. It leaves us with this heavy, almost unanswerable ethical dilemma. If you explicitly acknowledge that a building might fail, and you go ahead and build it anyway, who is responsible when it actually does fail? Rojas honestly thought transparency was a valid substitute for certainty. But we learned the hard way that just pointing at a flaw on a blueprint doesn't magically stop it from killing people. It really just changes the nature of our complicity. Section 4. Designing for Inevitable Failure. Fast forward to Tokyo in the year 2045, so about 47 years after the Meridian fell. We finally see a true paradigm shift emerge. Enter architect Kenji Tanaka. This guy completely threw the quest for perfect safety out the window and introduced failure-centered architecture. Instead of trying to make an indestructible building, Tanaka intentionally designed buildings with explicit weak points. He actually looked to nature for inspiration. You know, like how a tree will let its smaller branches snap in a hurricane so the main trunk doesn't get uprooted? He prioritized redundancy over perfection and aimed for what he called graceful structural degradation. He wasn't trying to build something that wouldn't break. He was brilliantly designing buildings that would break safely. And his theory got its ultimate test during a massive earthquake in Tokyo. Tanaka's building was hit hard. Walls cracked, steel connections snapped. But that was exactly the point. The building violently damaged itself on purpose to absorb the seismic energy. It degraded severely, yes, but it stayed standing, and every single resident inside walked out alive. It was a structure that survived precisely because it was allowed to fail. Section 5. The Philosophy of Uncertainty. Let's take a step back and look at what we've actually learned from all this. What we've basically just walked through is a classic Hegelian dialectic of risk. Think of it like this. Step 1 was our thesis, the absolute hubris of perfect logic that ended up destroying the Meridian Tower. Then we swung to Step 2, our antithesis, the paralyzing total transparency that still brought down the Ascension Tower, which finally leads us to Step 3, our synthesis, the humility of acknowledged incompleteness, seen in failure-centered design. It literally took decades of architectural evolution and the devastating sacrifice of human lives for society to finally figure out how to build with genuine humility. We essentially had to completely rewire our understanding of what safety even means. Inspector Tam, remember her? She finally realized this at the age of 77, after a literal lifetime of investigating these collapses. Certainty? It's a complete illusion. We have to let go of the idea that safety is some absolute mathematical guarantee. Instead, true safety is a continuous, totally imperfect process of managing inevitable failure. The goal isn't to prevent failure completely. The goal is to make each successive failure just a little bit less catastrophic than the last one. And this whole journey culminates beautifully, right back where it started, on the very site of the old Meridian Tower. 52 years after it fell, architect Amara Okafor built a memorial there. But she built it using those failure-centered principles. It is a structure explicitly designed to age, to slowly decay, and to deteriorate over time. Like she said, it models what it teaches, that absolutely nothing is permanent. It stands there today as a profound testament to the victims of forced certainty, just constantly reminding us that we have to accept decay rather than pretending we can conquer it. We've seen how entire disciplines, massive institutions, and some of the most brilliant minds on Earth convinced themselves they had completely conquered uncertainty, only to be violently crushed by reality. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to turn the lens directly onto you. Looking at your own life or your own work, what flaws is your certainty hiding?